They say time heals all wounds, but some wounds don't fade. They transform. After losing Maggie to the cold silence of a Himalayan night, Jack didn't search for peace. He walked into the heart of impermanence itself. From the golden temples of Thailand to the frozen passes of Tibet, from the chants of monks in Myanmar to the whisper of wind over Borobudur. Every step was an offering, every tear a teaching. This is not a story of loss. It's the story of becoming whole. Again. Om Mani Padme Hung. The valley of Zanskar was a cathedral of silence. By late winter, even the river had forgotten how to move. It slept under glass, its breathing shallow but alive. From the cliffside, Phuktal Monastery hung like a question carved from snow. White, weightless, patient. Inside one of its small stone cells, a single butter lamp burned beside two sleeping mats. Maggie's breath had grown thinner each night. Her fingers, once quick to tease the world, now trembled like prayer flags at the edge of wind. Jack sat beside her, not speaking. The silence between them had become fluent. They no longer needed words to remember what love felt like. Outside, snow began to fall, not in flakes, but in whole thoughts, soft and complete. Maggie opened her eyes. "Jack," she whispered, "if I stop breathing, promise me you'll keep listening." He looked up. To what? To whatever comes next. Jack nodded, his throat tight. "I will." She smiled faintly, that desert-born smile that had followed him across continents. "I used to think silence was empty," she said, her voice almost gone. "Now I know. It's just full of things we don't yet understand." Her eyes drifted toward the small altar, the bodhisattva statue, the white kata folded neatly, the bowl that had carried their days. Then she said, softly, "Om Mani Dewa Hri." Jack joined her. Their voices were uneven, the mantra trembling like a candle in a cave. Om Ami Dewa Hri. When her breath ended, it ended the way snow lands, without argument. For a long time, Jack didn't move. The butter lamp flickered once, as if bowing, then steadied. He pressed his forehead to her hands. They were still warm. The quiet did not crush him. It held him, like the river under ice, patient for spring. He stayed beside her body until dawn. When the gong rang for morning prayers, he rose, lit another lamp, and stepped outside. The wind had stopped. Every rooftop and ledge gleamed with a new layer of white, impermanent perfection. The monks gathered in the main hall, chanting the Bardo Thodol. Jack stood at the back, eyes half closed, following the rhythm. The words blurred into vibration, into breath. Somewhere between syllables, he felt Maggie, not as memory, but as movement, a warmth that did not belong to body or time. When the chanting ended, Lama Tsering approached him. The Lama's eyes were clear, reflecting no pity, only presence. "She is not gone," he said gently. "Only changed form, like water becoming mist." Jack nodded. He wanted to believe that. Tsering placed a hand on his shoulder. "The hardest part is not losing someone. It is learning to stop asking where they went." Outside, the monks began to prepare the ritual fire. Jack followed, his steps crunching through snow that glittered like powdered glass. He watched as they placed Maggie's body on the pyre, wrapped in white, her face uncovered. The sky opened wide above them, colorless and merciful. When the fire was lit, Jack whispered the only prayer that made sense to him. Om Mani Padme Hung. Compassion for her, for himself, for the vast machinery of impermanence that spared nothing. The smoke rose straight up, unbroken by wind. For a moment, it looked like a path. He thought of Scout, of the soldiers, of the endless caravan of faces that had crossed his life and disappeared into the same sky. Each time he had thought he was losing something. Each time, it was life teaching him how to let go without closing his heart. The fire burned all day. By nightfall, only embers remained, small, red planets pulsing with what refused to die. A novice approached with a small jar. "These are her ashes," he said. Jack took it with both hands. The jar was warm. He held it close to his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. "She was my mirror." For 7 days, Jack remained in Puktal. He meditated, fetched water, and helped rebuild a broken wall near the prayer hall. But something had already begun to move beneath his stillness, a quiet gravity pulling him away. He would wake before dawn, walk to the edge of the cliff, and watch the valley exhale mist into the light. The world kept teaching him the same lesson in 1,000 dialects. Nothing truly leaves. Everything changes address. On the 8th morning, he packed lightly. His bowl, Maggie's notebook, the small jar of ash, and the robe the Lama had given him. Brown, simple, warm enough for a long road. When he bowed to Lama Tsering, the old monk said only, "The world is very large, Jack, but the heart that walks it must remain small." Jack smiled. "I'll try." The Lama nodded. "And when you grow tired, don't stop. Just walk slower." He began the descent from Puktal before sunrise. The air was brittle, almost blue. Snow squeaked underfoot, each sound a punctuation mark on the page of mountain silence. The monastery grew smaller behind him until it became part of the rock, part of the sky, part of the sentence that had no end. By midday, he reached the river. It was still frozen, but cracked in places. Dark water whispering through thin seams of light. He knelt, opened the jar, and let a handful of Maggie's ashes fall into the current. They danced like smoke underwater. "Omami dewa hri," he whispered. The syllables spread across the valley like breath, released after centuries. He stood for a long time, watching the fragments drift away, until he could no longer tell which was water, which was ash, which was reflection. Then he picked up the bowl, slung it over his shoulder, and began to walk. He didn't know where the road would take him, only that it had already begun to teach. Each step became a vow. Behind him, the wind lifted, carrying the faint sound of monks chanting from the cliff, "Om Mani Padme Hum." It followed him down the valley like a blessing that refused to fade. Jack did not look back. Some goodbyes are not meant to be seen, only walked through. Bent. Lumbini did not announce itself with grandeur. It arrived like breath, soft over fields, mild under banyans, a hush of ponds rimmed with lotus that seemed to remember a morning older than the world. The path to the Maya Devi temple was lined with flags faded to pastel, as if the colors had given themselves away to centuries of wind and then returned as memory. Jack carried his bowl under one arm, his steps a gentle treaty with the earth. At the gate, a woman was struggling to help an elderly man from a cycle rickshaw. The man's chest rattled in a damp, uneven rhythm. Jack set his bowl on the ground and moved without hurry. He offered his forearm. The old man took it with the unguarded gratitude of someone who had needed help long enough to be done with pride. Together, they reached a bench in the shade. "Thank you," the woman said, breathless. She wore a simple cotton sari, the hem dark with pond water. "He is my father." Jack nodded. "May I sit?" "Please." They sat without conversation until the father's breathing eased enough to hold him. The garden's quiet did the next part. Wind in the reeds, a heron making a decision slowly enough for everyone to see it. Children's voices came and went like birds that had not yet learned schedule. Then the woman said, almost to herself, "People rush here to begin again, and yet this garden teaches slowness." Jack smiled. Birth was never a sprint. She looked at his bowl. "Are you a monk?" "No," he said. "Just learning how to ask for less and receive more." They walked together toward the temple's heart. Along the way, she told him her name, Annika, and how she came to the garden each week to bathe her father's feet in cool water. "He forgets everything but the sound of ponds," she said. "When he hears the frogs, he laughs." Inside the Maya Devi complex, white light pooled on brick and water. The marker stone, ancient as a promise, rested quietly beneath the glass floor. Pilgrims circled with the careful reverence of people returning a book to a library that had saved their lives. A group chanted near the railing. The syllables rose and fell like the tide that once used to live here when this place was still a river. Annika knelt and began to unlace her father's sandals. Her hands moved with the tenderness of a nurse and the precision of a ritualist. Jack crouched opposite, lifting the other strap free. The old man sighed as his feet found the stone. "Sometimes I think tenderness is the only strength left," Annika said. Jack considered. Maybe strength that never had tenderness wasn't strength at all, just stiffness. She smiled at that and wet a small cloth in the basin. As she washed her father's feet, Jack watched the water cloud and then clear again, the way grief and understanding exchange turns. He felt the old tremor of emergency in his shoulders, then noticed that it had no instructions to deliver. The air itself was taking care. He found himself whispering, almost on instinct, "Om Mani Padme Hung." The mantra entered the water the way light enters, without asking permission, with no need for ownership. Annika looked up, surprised, then nodded as if recognizing an old friend. "Do you chant for him?" she asked. "For us," Jack said, "so that whatever is needed can pass through." When they finished, Annika wrapped her father's feet in a clean cloth and tied it gently. The old man touched Jack's bowl with 2 fingers, then lifted those fingers to his forehead. The gesture was both blessing and thanks. They stepped outside and sat beneath a peepal tree. The afternoon had the soft fatigue of a kindly teacher. Annika told Jack that she worked nights at a clinic on the far road, that sometimes people arrived with fevers shaped like storms. "They look at me as if I could be the future," she said. "I don't know how to be the future." "Maybe we can't," Jack said. "Maybe we can only be a place where the future is allowed to arrive." She laughed, quick and bright. Then her face darkened. "Last month, a boy came with burns. He cried but wouldn't let me touch him. I tried everything, cool cloth, quiet voice. Nothing mattered. Then my father was there, on his good day. He took the boy's hand and said, in that voice he used when I was little, 'It's all right for things to hurt.' The boy stopped crying. I haven't forgiven the world for how simple it was." Jack looked at the lotus pond. Leaves shifted. The water made space for new reflections without fighting the old ones. "Gentleness," he said, "is intelligence that has learned the body." A group of pilgrims passed by, singing a slow hymn in Nepali. The tune curled like incense. Jack's chest remembered an old ache, not knife, not fire, just the ache of a door that kept opening. He let it be there. After a time, he said, "Would your father like to circle the garden? Slowly?" "He would," Annika said. "He walks like a ceremony." They moved along the path, a breath per step, palms joined when the old man felt steady. They paused by a small shrine where someone had placed a single mango next to a butter lamp. The fruit glowed like a minor sun. Jack remembered the mango a child had given him near Bodh Gaya, and a warm thread stitched the two mornings into one. Halfway around, the old man's breath tightened again. Annika's hands trembled as she reached for her bag. Jack touched her wrist, an invitation to slow. He knelt, placed two fingers lightly at the old man's pulse, and began, clear and unhurried. Om Bakanza, Bakanza Maha, Bakanza Radza Samugate Soha. The sound did not push, it held. The pulse steadied against his fingertips, first like a nervous bird, then like a small boat finding the wind. Annika exhaled. Tears stood in her eyes without falling. You learned that in a hospital. In a war, Jack said softly, which is to say, in a place not designed for healing. I practice it now, where healing is allowed. They completed the circle as the day leaned toward gold. Annika settled her father on a bench where he could hear frogs invent the evening. She turned to Jack. Why did you come? I thought I came to grieve, he answered. But now I think I came to learn how to let sorrow and kindness share the same chair. I can't keep them both, she admitted. One sits, the other leaves. Invite the one who leaves to stay for tea, Jack said. Don't ask it to behave. Just let it sit beside the one who knows how. Annika looked at him as if seeing the contours of a room that had always been there in the dark. She reached into her bag and took out a small vial of rose oil. For your path, she said. For when you forget to be gentle. Jack took it with both hands, the way he took alms or returned them. I will forget, he said, and then I'll remember. He lifted the vial to his forehead in thanks. Before departing, he stood by the water and whispered, Om Ami Dewa Hri. Not because death was here, but because birth was, and each asked the other to be bright. The syllables trembled over the pond and disappeared into the breathing of frogs. Annika wheeled her father away slowly. At the gate she turned and raised her palm, a gesture large enough to include gratitude and the unspoken apology of parting. Jack raised his palm in answer. The moment did not shrink when the distance grew. It learned how to be elastic. He walked once more around the temple, letting the soles of his feet record the lesson onto their own quiet. At the western edge, a small boy sat alone, holding a broken toy. Jack placed his bowl beside the child and sat. He said nothing. The boy turned the toy in his hands, and then, with the solemnity of a monk, placed it into the bowl. Jack bowed. It will be safe there, he said. The boy nodded, and something in the garden seemed to nod as well. As dusk thinned into evening, lights appeared along the paths. Jack opened Maggie's notebook and wrote, Here I am, learning that gentleness is not the absence of force. It is the refusal to force. Softness is a way of letting love survive its own weight. He closed the notebook and rested his palm a moment on its cover, as if blessing a child who had finally fallen asleep. When he left the garden, the air smelled of basil and cool earth. He carried the bowl in the crook of his arm, lighter than it had any right to be. At the gate, he paused and bowed, not to a statue, not to a stone, but to the temper of this place, the way it insisted that everything important arrive quietly. He turned toward the road that would take him to Sarnath. Behind him, frogs began their evening discourse. Ahead, the dark arranged itself into a corridor wide enough for one bowl and one breath. Jack walked it, with the small courage of someone who has decided not to hurry softness. And somewhere in the middle, the world reminded him, again and without scolding, that beginnings happen all day. Om Mani Padme Hung. The road from Lumbini to Sarnath was long and kind. Jack walked mostly in silence, the bowl swinging gently against his side. Each step was a question, each breath a reply too quiet for sound. The villages he passed were full of dust and dawn. Children chasing goats, women drawing water, men bent over rice like prayers returning to the soil. By the time he reached the city of Varanasi, the air had changed. It smelled of smoke, incense, and centuries. The river Ganges glowed like liquid brass, wide and slow, mirroring the weight of everything it had ever carried. He crossed by ferry at dusk, and by nightfall, he reached Sarnath, a place where silence itself seemed to have once been spoken aloud. The deer park opened before him like a bowl turned upside down, wide, round, holding nothing but air and echoes. Wind moved through the grasses, carrying fragments of chanting from distant temples. At the center stood Dhammik Stupa, immense and unmoving, its weathered bricks breathing history. Jack felt the gravity of stillness, the kind that does not ask for attention, but receives it anyway. He set his bowl down beside a banyan tree and sat. The wind pressed its palms together and bowed. He stayed there through the morning. Pilgrims came and went, monks in maroon robes, travelers with cameras, children tossing coins into the pond. Jack remained still, listening, not to the sounds, but to what the sounds revealed when they were gone. At noon, a young novice approached him. His robe was too large, his smile too open. "Are you meditating, sir?" Jack opened one eye, listening. The boy tilted his head. "To what?" "To everything that doesn't need to be said." The boy laughed softly, bowed, and went to chase a butterfly. Jack smiled, not because it was funny, but because joy had just translated itself without words. That evening, he attended a Dharma talk under the same banyan tree. A teacher from the monastery sat cross-legged, his voice as light as smoke. When the Buddha gave his first sermon, he said, he did not create religion. He created rhythm. The words were not commands, but invitations. The truth was not told, it was heard. Jack closed his eyes. The teacher's voice folded the air into calm. Each word, the monk continued, is a bridge. Some bridges lead us home. Some lead us into fire. We build both with the same tongue. A pause followed, long and generous. Even the wind stopped to listen. "Therefore," the monk said, "speak as if every word is your last chance to heal." Jack felt something loosen in his chest, a thread pulling free from years of silence that had been heavy, not peaceful. He remembered the desert, the nights he screamed alone into metal walls, the echo that had come back harder than the cry itself. He remembered every word he hadn't said to the dying, to Amy, to his brothers, to Scout, to Maggie. He had mistaken silence for peace. It had been only fear of sound. He pressed his palms together and whispered, barely audible, Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. The mantra moved through him like a stream through sand, slow, cleansing, honest. The next morning, he walked to a smaller temple on the far side of the park. The walls were cracked, the paint faded, but inside there was a bell that still worked. He knelt before it, noticing how its metal was neither polished nor forgotten, just real. He struck it gently. The sound rose, expanded, and dissolved into something too vast for the ear. When the resonance finally faded, Jack found tears on his face. They didn't feel like grief. They felt like words that had finally found another form. He sat cross-legged and began to speak softly, as if to someone who was listening beneath the earth. I used to speak to be heard. Then I stopped speaking because I was afraid of what words could break. Now I see. A word can break, but it can also mend. The same sound that wounds can call something back to life. He paused, and the bell seemed to breathe with him. A monk entered quietly, an elder with thin hair and kind eyes. "You are talking to ghosts," he said with a smile. Jack nodded. "They've waited long enough." The monk sat beside him. "Do they answer?" "In their own way," Jack said. "Not with sound, with forgiveness." The elder folded his hands. "Then your practice is true. In Sarnath, every stone remembers the first words of awakening. But the secret is this: words did not awaken the world. Listening did." Jack lowered his head. "Then I'll keep listening." "Good," the monk said. "But remember, when you listen deeply, you also become the silence that speaks." That evening, as the sun dropped behind the stupas, Jack lit a single candle and placed it on the base of the monument. The flame trembled, but did not die. He thought of Maggie's voice, the way she used to read aloud from Thich Nhat Hanh. "When you speak, be sure your words are more beautiful than silence." The candle flickered once, like agreement. Jack whispered, "Om tar tutere ture soha." May all voices become bridges. May all silences learn to listen. The wind answered softly through the reeds. He stayed until the stars began to rise, until the night's breath sounded like a mantra repeated by the sky itself. When he finally stood to leave, he bowed not to the stupa, but to the emptiness that made every word possible. Kushinagar smelled of sandalwood and dusk. The air itself seemed to bow, gentle, solemn, infinite. The stupa shimmered in the distance, golden beneath the dying sun, and the road leading to it was lined with sal trees, their pale blossoms drifting like slow snow. Jack had walked for days, and yet, as he entered the town, he felt no fatigue, only stillness, the kind that follows the final note of a song. He arrived just as the evening bells began to ring. Monks in saffron robes moved through the courtyard, carrying candles. Their faces were calm, but their eyes carried the knowing weight of impermanence. At the temple gate, an old monk handed Jack a small stick of incense. "For the passing," he said simply. Jack didn't ask whose. He didn't need to. Inside, the air was thick with mantra. The great Buddha lay on his right side, serene and unguarded, the marble of his feet worn smooth by centuries of devotion. Flowers covered the platform like waves of surrender. In the corner, a body wrapped in yellow silk lay before a pyre. The monks were chanting softly, "Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha." Jack knelt beside the pyre. His bowl rested on his lap. He didn't know the monk who had died, but he felt a strange familiarity. The same quiet that had once filled Maggie's room in those last months, when even words had become too heavy. When the fire was lit, a hush spread through the crowd. The flames rose slowly, respectfully, as though reluctant to consume what was holy. The air trembled. The monks continued to chant, their voices merging into one low river of sound. The orange light reflected in Jack's eyes, and for a moment he thought he saw Scout's fur, Maggie's hands, Amy's smile, all flickering in the dance of fire, neither alive nor gone, just moving. He whispered, his voice trembling, "Nothing truly ends." The fire crackled softly in reply. He closed his eyes. Inside his mind, memories rose. Nevada's sandstorms, Maggie's laughter under a desert moon, the soft thump of Scout's tail on tin floors, and then silence, vast and merciful. Jack began to chant, not with voice, but with heart. Om Benza, Sato Samaya Manupalaya, Benza, Sato Denopatita, Trido me bhava, Sutokayo me bhava, Supokayo me bhava, Anurakto me bhava, Sarva Siddhi me prayatsa, Sarva Karma Sutsame, Chittam Shriyam Kuruhom, Ha 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 ho, Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata, Benza Mame Mutsa, Benzi Bhava Mahasamaya Sato, Ah. Each syllable rose like smoke and fell like forgiveness. It wasn't a prayer to escape death. It was a surrender to the truth that nothing ever dies, only transforms. The pyre burned deep into the night. One by one, people left. Jack remained. The monks offered him food. He shook his head. His hunger felt sacred, like part of the ritual. A young novice sat beside him, silent for a long while, then asked, "Did you know him?" Jack looked at the fire. "No, but I think he knew me." The boy frowned. "How?" "Because everything that lives will someday burn," Jack said softly, "and everything that burns will someday live again." The novice stared into the flames. "Then why do I feel sad?" "Because love wants to hold what it can't keep," Jack answered. He smiled, not out of comfort, but recognition. And that's how we learn to love better. When the last ember dimmed, Jack walked toward the stupa. The moon was high, and the air smelled of ash and jasmine. He placed his bowl down and bowed 3 times. The ground beneath him was warm, not from the fire, but from the compassion it had left behind. He whispered to the night, "Maggie, if you can hear me, I'm learning. Not how to let go, but how to hold you without clinging." A tear slid down, slow and warm. He didn't wipe it away. The next morning, a soft mist rose over the river. Jack followed the monks as they gathered alms, silent, barefoot, their bowls cradled like the world's heart. At each doorstep, people offered rice, fruit, flowers. No one spoke. The exchange was older than language, giving as gratitude, receiving as humility. Jack stopped before an old woman who offered him a single banana. Her hands trembled as she placed it in his bowl. "For my husband," she whispered. "He passed here long ago." Jack bowed deeply. "Then this is his blessing." She smiled through tears, and in that moment, Jack understood what it meant to walk for others. He ate half the banana and placed the rest on the riverbank for the birds. The water took his reflection and scattered it into ripples. Dozens of them. None of them fixed. That afternoon, he visited the site of the Mahaparinirvana, the final rest. He sat under a sal tree, tracing its fallen flowers with his fingers. Each petal looked like a tiny heart turned inside out. The wind was still, the kind of stillness that holds a heartbeat. He spoke softly, almost afraid to disturb the air. "I used to fear losing what I loved. Now I fear only forgetting that love was never mine to keep." A bird called from somewhere unseen. Jack smiled. "Yes," he whispered. "That's the sound of remembering." He closed his eyes, breathing in the fragrance of the blossoms, and recited again, slower, deeper. Om Benza Sato Samaya. When the final syllable faded, a tear fell on his wrist, not his own. The wind had shifted, and a drop of dew from the tree had landed there, shining. Jack laughed softly. "Even the sky is weeping kindly." That night, under the full moon, the monks gathered by the river to release floating lamps. Jack lit one, whispering Maggie's name. The lamp drifted, wobbling, then found its current. One by one, hundreds followed. A constellation reborn on water. Jack pressed his palms together, eyes shimmering. If the soul is light, then nothing truly sets. It only changes sky. As the lamps disappeared, downstream, he whispered the mantra one last time, each word dissolving into the hum of the world. Om Benza Sato Samaya. The next morning, when the sun rose, Jack walked away barefoot. The ashes were cold now, and the temple quiet. But inside him, something new had begun to bloom. A peace that no longer depended on answers. He turned once before leaving the town. The wind carried the scent of sandalwood and something else. Maybe Maggie's laughter folded into the sound of morning bells. Jack smiled. There was no more loss left to grieve. Only love, stretching endlessly, from one form into another. And as he disappeared down the road, the sal petals fell gently behind him, not like endings, but like blessings. The Chao Phraya River carried light like a secret. At dawn, Bangkok shimmered. Gold on water, bells in the distance, 1,000 prayers unfolding on the wind. Jack arrived barefoot, bowl in hand, robe simple and worn from travel. The morning air smelled of jasmine and boat smoke, of incense mixed with city breath. He stood before Wat Arun, the temple of the dawn. Its porcelain spires caught the first light like frozen flames, shimmering in white and gold. The monks' chanting echoed through the courtyards, soft, rhythmic, ancient. Jack bowed deeply. The sound entered him, not through the ears, but through the ribs, the marrow, the silence that had learned to listen. Inside the main temple, the floor was cool beneath his feet. A golden Buddha sat cross-legged, eyes lowered in eternal dawn. Jack knelt. His reflection flickered on the marble tiles, a face aged by journeys, yet finally calm. An old Thai monk approached, robes the color of sunlight on wet leaves. He smiled and spoke softly, his English halting but full of kindness. "You walk long way, yes?" Jack nodded. "Many roads, many prayers." The monk chuckled. "And all roads same. They end here." Jack smiled faintly. "Where is here, Venerable?" The monk touched his heart. "Here." They sat together in silence. Outside, the river murmured against the temple's edge. After a while, the monk said, "People think Thai Buddhism is simple. Only meditation, no magic. But see, simplicity is deepest magic." He gestured toward the novices sweeping the courtyard, their motions slow and mindful. Every breath, every broom stroke is practice. No need for gods, no need for mountains. Just knowing you are here, and kind. Jack watched. The boys moved like the rhythm of water, unhurried, repeating, eternal. He whispered, Om Mani Padme Hum. The monk nodded, pleased. Compassion, always start there, end there. Same in Tibet, same in Thailand, same in heart. Jack felt something within him ease, a knot untied by understanding. All the teachings, all the pilgrimages, all the mantras, they were not different roads, only different ways of remembering the same truth. Later that morning, Jack joined the monks on their alms round. The streets were still half asleep, the sky pink like old silk. He walked barefoot behind the line of orange robes, bowl cradled before him. People knelt by the roadside, vendors, school children, taxi drivers, offering rice, fruit, flowers. No one asked for anything in return. This was the quiet exchange of hearts, giving as devotion, receiving as humility. An old woman placed a handful of jasmine in Jack's bowl. For my daughter, she whispered. She passed last year. Jack bowed. May she be light. The woman smiled, toothless, luminous. She already is. When they returned to the temple, Jack sat by the river steps. The monks ate mindfully, their reflections rippling on the water. Jack didn't eat. He watched the sun rising higher, turning the river into liquid gold. He thought of Maggie, how she used to laugh at the smallest things, how she would whisper, breathe, whenever he forgot. He remembered the Dalai Lama's words, "Pain is the doorway, not the wall." He remembered Lama Sering's smile in Ladakh, "Silence is not absence, it is arrival." And now, here in Thailand, he realized the path was neither mountain nor desert. It was water, always flowing, always returning. He whispered again, "Om Mani Padme Hum." May the jewel of compassion shine in every drop. That evening, the temple glowed. Hundreds of candles lined the steps, their flames mirrored in the water. Bells rang from the pagoda towers, slow, solemn, infinite. The old monk from the morning came and sat beside Jack, offering him a cup of tea. "Tomorrow," he said, "we celebrate Asalha Puja, the day Buddha first spoke Dharma. You should stay." Jack smiled. "I will." The monk looked at him for a long moment. "You know, in Thailand, we say, all rivers meet in the sea of kindness. You walk many lands, but compassion, same ocean." Jack felt his throat tighten. "In my country, I learned to fight. In these countries, I'm learning to bow." The monk's eyes shone. "Both are courage, but only bowing brings peace." They drank their tea in silence, watching boats pass like slow prayers. Somewhere upriver, fireworks bloomed, soft bursts of gold scattering across the sky, then fading into darkness. Jack smiled. "Even light returns to water." The monk nodded. "And water returns to light." That night, unable to sleep, Jack walked to the riverbank. The temple spires glowed faintly under the moon, and the wind carried distant chants. He sat on the steps and let his hand drift into the water. The current was cool, steady, full of stars. He whispered, "Maggie, if compassion is the river, then maybe you're already here, in every drop that touches me." A tear fell, merging with the river. He smiled. It felt like she had answered. He began to chant softly, voice trembling but steady. "Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum." Each repetition felt lighter, wider, deeper, until the words themselves dissolved, leaving only breath. At dawn, he joined the monks again by the temple gate. They bowed toward the rising sun, a ritual older than memory. The light flooded across the courtyard, bathing the golden Buddha, the novices, the flowers, the river. Jack felt something rise in his chest. Not sorrow, not longing, but clarity. He realized every teaching, whether of mountains or rivers, of stillness or action, was the same ocean of awakening. He whispered to himself, "The Buddha is not in Tibet or Thailand. The Buddha is in how the heart learns to see." The old monk placed a hand on his shoulder. "You ready to walk again?" Jack nodded. "Yes, but not away. Just through." The monk smiled. "Then the path will walk with you." As the bells rang once more, Jack stepped into the sunlight. The river caught the reflection of Wadaroon's towers and broke them gently apart, not destruction, but sharing the light. And somewhere, within that shimmering current, he thought he heard Maggie laugh, soft, free, like dawn becoming day. The road to Lhasa wound like a prayer. High above the world, Jack walked where the air grew thin and the sky pressed close enough to touch. The mountains gleamed, white, ancient, breathing light. He had crossed many lands, but Tibet felt different. It wasn't a place, it was a pulse. Everywhere he turned, he saw devotion. Men and women spinning prayer wheels, children tying flags that whispered in the wind, old pilgrims prostrating with their whole bodies along the road, palms scraping stone, foreheads dusted with earth. Jack paused to watch a woman kneeling in the snow, her movements slow and graceful. She rose, stepped forward, prostrated again. Her face was cracked by cold and time, but her eyes glowed with peace. He felt his throat tighten. Would I ever bow like that? Not out of duty, but out of love? When he reached Jokong Temple, the air shimmered with incense and human breath. The square before it was alive. Thousands of pilgrims prostrating in rhythm, their bodies flowing like waves of devotion. The great golden roof shone against the deep blue of the Lhasa sky. Prayer flags snapped in the wind like beating hearts. Jack removed his shoes. The stone beneath his feet was polished smooth by centuries of faith. Each step felt like walking across time itself. Inside, the light dimmed. The air was heavy with yak butter lamps, their flames trembling like the pulse of eternity. Murmured chants filled the corridors. He followed the sound, deeper and deeper, until he reached the shrine of Jowo Rinpoche, the ancient statue said to have been blessed by the Buddha himself. Before it, a mother knelt with her child, a boy, maybe 7. His head was shaved, his robe too big, his hands trembling as he tried to light a candle. The wick refused to catch. The mother smiled gently and guided his hand. The flame flickered, wavered, then held. The boy's face glowed gold in the reflection. The mother whispered, "Now, pray." The child pressed his palms together and said softly, in a mix of Tibetan and breath, "Om Mani Padme Hum." Jack felt something break open inside him. It wasn't grief, it wasn't joy. It was the feeling of seeing something utterly pure, so small, yet large enough to heal the world. He sat in the back corner of the hall for hours. The monks chanted, deep, resonant, endless. The rhythm was the rhythm of the universe itself. Rise, fall, stillness. Each beat of the drum echoed in his chest, like a heart too large for one man to carry. At one point, an old monk sat beside him. His face was a map of wind and compassion. Without speaking, he handed Jack a small string of prayer beads. Jack took them, turning each bead between his fingers. The monk smiled. "Not count. Feel." Jack nodded. He closed his eyes, rolling one bead at a time, whispering, "Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum." At first, he repeated out of habit, then rhythm, then tears. Each repetition seemed to untangle one thread of sorrow, one knot of memory. He saw Maggie's smile, Scout's eyes, Amy's laughter, all flowing into one current of love. The monk whispered, "All suffering becomes medicine when you stop running from it." Jack breathed in sharply. "That's what I've been learning, all along." The monk nodded. "Then don't stop. Keep walking until even the walker disappears." That night, the city glowed with devotion. From every window, butter lamps flickered. From every rooftop, mantras rode the wind. Jack wandered the streets barefoot, prayer beads in hand. He came upon a group of pilgrims sitting together around a small fire. One of them waved him closer. "Sit, brother," the man said in broken English. His face was rough, his smile brilliant. Jack sat. They passed him a cup of butter tea. Thick, salty, strange, but warm. The man pointed to his own chest. "Kora tomorrow, around Jokang, all night. You come?" Jack hesitated. His body was tired, but his heart was not. "Yes," he said. The man laughed, clapping his back. "Good. Suffering becomes prayer. You see tomorrow." At midnight, they began. Hundreds circled Jokang clockwise. Monks, mothers, old men leaning on sticks, children half asleep. Jack walked among them, step by step, mantra by mantra. The air was cold enough to sting, but the rhythm of feet on stone warmed the night. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. The chant rose like wind, fell like breath, endless, seamless. A woman beside Jack stumbled. He reached out instinctively, steadying her. She smiled through tears, whispering, Tashi Delek. Blessing. He nodded, repeating it softly. Tashi Delek. It felt like saying, I see you. I walk with you. They continued through the night. When dawn came, the sky was pale pink over the rooftops. The final round ended in silence. Everyone bowed together. Jack sank to his knees. In that moment, faith was no longer something he was searching for. It was something he was breathing. As the first rays of sunlight struck the golden roof, he raised his hands in prayer. May every step become compassion. May every breath carry love. May every life find its way home. He wept, not from pain, but from the beauty of existing. For the first time, his tears felt clean. He looked toward the east, where the mountains met the sky, and whispered, Om Mani Padme Hum. The sound lingered, soft as wind over snow. And in that stillness, Jack understood. Faith is not believing in something greater. It is remembering that you already belong to it. The rain had stopped just as dawn began to bloom. Jack stood at the foot of Borobudur, the great stone mandala rising out of the mist. 9 tiers of stone spirals reached toward the sky, each one carved with stories of awakening. To climb it was to walk through the map of the mind, from desire to form, from form to formlessness, from self to silence. He began to ascend barefoot. The air was cool, alive with the smell of wet earth and incense. Each step echoed faintly, a heartbeat on stone. At every level, the carvings told the same story. Birth, pain, seeking, release. By the time he reached the upper terraces, the world below was lost in cloud. He sat beside one of the great stupas, its bell-shaped stone pierced with openings like the breath of the universe. Inside, a Buddha faced the horizon. Jack gazed at it for a long time. The calm, the poise, the balance. He whispered, the world was never broken. Only my seeing was. A monk sitting nearby turned to him and smiled. Borobudur means the mountain of awakening, but awakening is not up there. He pointed to the sky. It's here. He touched his chest. Jack nodded slowly. So the climb is inward. The monk chuckled. Always. They sat in silence as the morning light spread over the valley. The mist thinned, revealing rice fields glistening like green mirrors. Jack closed his eyes, and for a moment, his breath matched the rhythm of the birds, the bells, the whole living world. He began to whisper softly, Om Bakanse, Bakanse, Maha Bakanse, Radsa Samugate Soha. The Medicine Buddha mantra, a prayer not to escape suffering, but to turn pain into healing. Later that week, Jack traveled south to Bali. He had planned to stay one night. He stayed 3 weeks. The island greeted him with warmth, soft rain on temples, the laughter of children, the scent of frangipani flowers. One morning, while walking through Ubud's rice terraces, he saw a sign. Yoga and breath workshop, all are welcome. He smiled. Maybe the universe was still teaching. The class was held in an open pavilion surrounded by palms. Dozens of people sat on mats, eyes closed, hearts open. The teacher, a Balinese woman named Ananta, welcomed him with a gentle bow. Yoga, she said, is not about poses. It's about remembering how to breathe. Jack smiled. I've spent half my life forgetting. Ananta nodded. Then this is where you remember. She led them through slow, mindful postures: mountain, warrior, tree. Each breath guided the body, and each movement dissolved the distance between thought and presence. Jack felt the tightness in his chest soften. The weight he'd carried for years began to melt into breath. At one point, during Savasana, she whispered, "Every inhale is birth. Every exhale is surrender. Between them, that's where peace lives." Jack lay still, tears pooling beside his ears. He had walked through deserts, through grief, through mountains of silence. And now, peace had arrived quietly, like the breath itself. After class, Ananta approached him. "You carry a lot of stories," she said softly. Jack laughed through his nose. "Too many." She handed him a small bowl of water with floating petals. "Then let one story rest. Whisper it into the water. Let it go." He hesitated, then closed his eyes. The memory that rose was of Maggie. Her voice, her warmth, her last winter smile. He whispered her name. A tear fell into the bowl. The surface rippled, caught the light, then stilled. Ananta smiled. "Now she lives in the movement. That's what yoga means. Union. Nothing lost. Everything connected." Jack breathed deeply, and for the first time, it felt like the breath was breathing him. The following mornings, he stayed to learn more. Not just yoga, but pranayama, metta meditation, and walking awareness. He learned that the body, too, could be a teacher. That stillness wasn't only found on mountains, but in the curve of the spine, the rhythm of lungs, the heartbeat that refused to quit. During one dawn session, as golden light filled the hall, Ananta guided the group into a silent meditation. She said, "Don't try to quiet the mind. Just let it dance, and notice who's watching." Jack smiled. He saw his thoughts: grief, joy, memories swirl and fade like incense smoke. And beneath it all, he saw something vast and unchanging. The same stillness he had met in Tibet, in Thailand, in himself. He whispered, "Om Bakanze Bakanze Maha Bakanze Radza Samugat Soha." The mantra rose and fell with his breath. It was not medicine for the body, but for the ache of separation, the illusion that we were ever apart. On his last day, Ananta gave him a parting blessing. "Where will you go next?" she asked. Jack smiled. "Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere." She bowed. "Then may your breath always return home." He looked out at the ocean, waves rolling in like long exhales. He whispered, "Maggie, Scout, Amy, we never stopped walking together. You just became wind, and I became breath." The tide answered with a hush, like the world breathing back. And in that moment, Jack understood. The body is the temple. The breath is the prayer. The heart is the silence that never leaves. The Bodhi tree whispered in the wind. Its leaves shimmered like small hearts, turning light into prayer. Jack sat beneath it, cross-legged among thousands of pilgrims who had come from all corners of the world. The air was thick with incense and the low hum of mantras. But for Jack, the noise had become distant, like waves heard from under the sea. He had been in Bodh Gaya for days, but time no longer moved the same way. Morning blended into evening, prayer into silence, breath into tears. He had not spoken much. He didn't need to. There was nothing left to say that life hadn't already whispered through loss. He remembered that first night after arriving, the air cold, the temple grounds glowing with butter lamps. He had sat there watching a group of monks chant the Amitabha mantra for the departed. The sound was soft, almost tender. Om Amidewa Hri. It was said the mantra helped guide souls toward light. But as Jack listened, he felt it wasn't just for Maggie. It was for every version of himself that had died and been reborn along the way. The flame of a nearby lamp flickered, and in its reflection, he saw her, not in form, but in the gentle warmth that touched his face. He smiled through his tears. "Maggie," he whispered, "you never left, did you?" The air answered with a hush, like her breath in the dark. Each morning, he joined the monks in walking meditation around the Mahabodhi temple. They circled slowly, barefoot on ancient stone, eyes half closed, chanting in rhythm. Sometimes Jack carried a small bowl of water and poured it by the roots of the Bodhi tree, an offering for all who had walked before him, and for the woman who could no longer walk beside him. He no longer prayed for healing. He prayed for understanding. He realized that grief was not something to conquer. It was something to honor, because grief was love that had nowhere left to go. And so he let it sit beside him, like an old friend. One afternoon, a young novice monk named Tenzin sat down near him. The boy couldn't have been more than 12. His robe was too long, his smile too wide. He offered Jack a small bowl of rice. "For you," he said in hesitant English. Jack bowed. "Thank you." The boy sat quietly for a while, watching the sunlight move across the ground. Then he said, "My mother died last year. I come here to see her." Jack looked at him gently. "And do you?" Tenzin thought for a long time. "Yes," he said finally, "but not like before. Now she's in the wind. When I breathe, I feel her breathe." Jack closed his eyes. That was it. The simplest truth he'd ever heard. He whispered, "Om Ami Dewa Hri." The mantra rose between them like a bridge. That night, Jack stayed under the Bodhi tree as the moon climbed high. He thought of Scout, the loyal heart that had never stopped loving. He thought of Maggie, the laughter that had become silence. He thought of every person he had met along the road, monks, strangers, teachers, ghosts, and he realized they were all mirrors, showing him pieces of himself he had been too afraid to look at. The world had never taken anything from him. It had only returned him to himself. A cool wind swept through the temple grounds, shaking the prayer flags. Jack closed his eyes, feeling it on his skin, through his lungs, through his bones. He whispered softly, "Pain was the path. Love was the guide. Silence was the destination." The words dissolved into breath. In the distance, a group of nuns began chanting softly, "Om Amidewa Hri, Om Amidewa Hri." Their voices wove through the leaves, through the sky, through the ache in Jack's chest, and something in him gave way. He began to cry, quietly, fully, gratefully. Each tear that fell seemed to carry a lifetime, of battle, of guilt, of loss, and each one, as it touched the earth, disappeared. When dawn came, the world was washed clean. The temple bells rang, and the first rays of light touched the Bodhi tree, turning every leaf into gold. Jack placed his hand on the trunk. "Thank you," he said simply. He didn't know if he was speaking to Buddha, or to Maggie, or to the quiet within himself. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe they were all the same. He whispered the mantra one last time, "Om Ami Dewa Hri." And as he rose to leave, he felt a calm so deep it frightened him. Not the calm of forgetting, but of remembering too well. The kind of calm that comes when you've carried your ghosts long enough to realize they were never haunting you. They were guiding you home. The desert was waiting, not with fire, not with fury, but with silence. the kind of silence that hums beneath the skin, that remembers your name even when you've forgotten it. When Jack stepped out of the old bus that had carried him from California to Nevada, the horizon stretched endlessly before him. The air shimmered with heat. The sagebrush waved faintly in the wind. Somewhere, a coyote called, long, low, lonely. He smiled. Still the same, he whispered. It had been years. The container home was still there, half buried under sand, its paint faded and rusted. But it no longer looked like a tomb. It looked like a shrine. Jack opened the door slowly. The hinges creaked, releasing a breath of memory. Inside, everything was covered in a fine layer of dust. His old books, Maggie's candle holder, Scout's worn collar. He sat down on the floor, running his fingers along the metal. So much had happened here. So much had died. So much had been born again. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to whisper, Om Benza, Sato Samaya Manupalaya, Benza Sato Denopatita, Drido Me Bhava, Suto Kayo Me Bhava. The words rolled through the air like slow thunder. He could feel them vibrate in his chest. Ancient, forgiving, infinite. He wasn't reciting for forgiveness anymore. He was reciting for integration, to let every scar, every mistake, every loss fold back into the whole. Outside, the desert wind answered softly, carrying sand like smoke. That evening, he built a small altar near the window, a bowl of water, a candle, Maggie's scarf, Scout's collar, and a smooth stone he had brought from Bodh Gaya. He lit the candle. Its flame trembled, then steadied. Welcome home, he whispered to the ghosts. And somehow, the room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of presence. He could almost hear Maggie's laughter. He could almost feel Scout's warm fur brushing his hand. He could almost smell the incense from Dharamsala, the sea breeze from Bali, the snow from Ladakh. Everything he had ever loved had returned, not as memories, but as breath. Each morning, Jack rose before dawn. He walked barefoot through the sand, the cool grains shifting beneath his feet. The desert sky at sunrise was like a painting too vast for human eyes. Gold bleeding into crimson, crimson into blue. He sat on the old porch and meditated. No more chanting, no more effort, just breath. Sometimes he would whisper quietly, Om Benza Sato Samaya, and let the sound dissolve into wind. He no longer sought enlightenment. He no longer needed peace. He was peace. One morning, while walking toward the dry riverbed, he found a single white feather lying in the sand. He picked it up gently. The feather quivered in the wind, delicate, weightless. He smiled. Hello, Scout. He placed it on the altar that night, next to Maggie's scarf. Still walking with me, huh? He said softly. The candle flickered once, as if answering. As the days turned to weeks, Jack found joy in the smallest things. The way the sun warmed his hands, the hum of cicadas at dusk, the rhythm of his own breath as he tended a small garden behind the container. He had planted wild sage and lavender, things that could thrive in dryness. One evening, as he watered the plants, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Thunder cracked across the valley. Rain fell, rare, wild, cleansing. Jack stood in it, arms open, head tilted back. The cold drops soaked his clothes, ran down his face. He began to laugh, a deep, honest laugh that came from the center of the world. He shouted over the wind, You win life. You always did. And then he whispered, Thank you. That night, under a sky thick with stars, he lit the butter lamp again. The air smelled of rain and dust and sage. He closed his eyes and felt the stillness settle around him. For the first time, he understood what silence really was. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything. He whispered, "Pain was the teacher. Love was the lesson. Silence was home." He bowed deeply, and for a long, long moment, the desert breathed with him. The desert was quiet, not the kind of quiet that follows death, but the quiet that holds life in its palms. Jack sat outside the container as the first light bled across the horizon. His hair had turned silver. His hands, marked with years, rested calmly on his knees. In front of him, a small flame flickered inside a butter lamp, its glow trembling like a pulse. He opened his notebook, the same one he'd carried since the war, its pages filled with fragments, prayers, tears, sketches of mountains, Maggie's name written again and again. There was one page left. He dipped his pen, hesitated, and then began to write. All that I sought was already here. All that I lost was never gone. The desert does not take. It teaches. The silence does not end. It listens. He paused. The wind brushed across his cheek, soft and warm, and for a moment he could almost hear a voice. Maggie's laughter, light as the morning. Scout's bark, distant but clear. Amy's whisper from a lifetime ago. "Keep walking." Jack smiled. "Still here?" he said quietly. He placed the pen down and folded his hands. The world had grown still. No past, no future, only this breathing, this knowing, this love that needed no form. He whispered, "Om Mani Padme Hum." The mantra flowed with his breath, gentle and whole. Each syllable was a step through time, through sorrow, through all the places he'd been. And when it ended, there was no end at all. Only space, only light, only the soft rhythm of being. The candle flickered once more, then steadied. Jack closed his eyes. He was not meditating. He was simply being. The desert exhaled. The mountains watched. The air shimmered with quiet gold. Somewhere, far away, a bell rang. Its sound slow, tender, as if the earth itself had taken a long breath and was letting it go. Jack whispered one last time, "Thank you." And then, only silence. Not the silence of endings, but of wholeness. The silence that breathes, that sings, that is. If this story touched something quiet in you, if you felt the desert wind, the hum of Jack's silence, or the weight of a love that never really left, don't let it end here. Stories like this aren't meant to finish. They're meant to continue. In your breath, in your stillness, in the way you look at the world when it forgets to slow down. Take a moment now. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let the silence settle. And if this journey spoke to your heart, subscribe, leave a comment, and share what part of Jack's path stayed with you. Every voice, every reflection keeps this flame alive. For someone, somewhere, who's still walking through their own desert, still learning how to breathe again. Thank you for walking with us, for feeling, for staying. The next story begins soon, and maybe it's already waiting inside you. Until then, walk gently, breathe deeply, and listen, because even in silence, the heart still speaks. Om Mani Padme Hum.